Thank you, Bishop. Um, I decided for my talk to give a more general talk about the cultural and political situation of the world. Many of my examples will be about things that are happening in the United States. So you can think about your own countries and see if the same thing is happening there or not. That's going to be the first part of my talk. And then in the second part, I want to connect theology of the body and even the reason for this symposium to the current cultural and political situation. So I won't be delving deeply into the text itself like Archbishop Jean Lafitte did, but I want to sort of set a stage maybe for all of our talks. And I'd like to begin by reading a quote I found, or a friend of mine found it, by Pope Benedict XVI in the book, The Ratzinger Report. So I'm just going to read the quote, and then at the end of my talk, hopefully you'll see why I read it. Pope Benedict said it there, "The only really effective apologia for Christianity comes down to two arguments, namely, the saints the Church has produced and the art which has grown in her womb. Better witness is borne to the Lord by the splendor of holiness and art which have arisen in the community of believers than by the clever excuses which apologetics has come up with to justify the dark sides which sadly are so frequent in the Church's human history. Christians must not be too easily satisfied. They must make their church into a place where beauty and hence truth is at home. Without this, the world will become the first circle of hell." That's what Pope. I like that part at the beginning, the saints and art. Okay. So, the current cultural situation. Last week, on two occasions, Pope Francis dropped his prepared remarks and allowed children and students and one professor to ask him anything they wanted. One young woman asked him, "How is it possible to be hopeful when there are crises everywhere?" And the Pope said, "Crises are good when they force people to address their root cause, the complete disregard for the human person." And in his Wednesday audience last week, the Pope commented on the economic and environmental crises, saying, "The cause of the problem is not superficial but profound. It is not just a matter of economics, but of ethics and anthropology." And a Spanish and religion teacher then asked the Pope whether Catholics should involve themselves in politics. And the Pope said that Catholics have an obligation to get involved in politics. We can't play the role of Pontius Pilate and wash our hands of it. Politics is one of the highest forms of charity, he said, because it seeks the common good. So now to go deeper into the cultural situation, I would like to talk about, and I said I'm going to focus on the United States because that's what I'm familiar with, but you think about it with respect to your own countries. In last year, in 2012, the United States bishops had their ad limina visit with Pope Benedict. And he focused, especially his January 19th address to a certain group of bishops from America, exclusively on the question of religious freedom. And he pointed out a two-part threat that is happening in my country. One, forcing Catholics to participate in intrinsically evil actions, or forcing everyone to. So birth control, abortion, euthanasia are some examples. And then the second is the verbal engineering of the term religious freedom into the term freedom of worship. This subtle but deliberate terminological shift is meant to instill in the minds of those who hear it the notion that religion is a purely private affair, to be practiced only behind closed doors. This idea then is used in the broader effort to force Catholics and others of other religions to refrain from expressing their deeply held positions and beliefs in public, in word and deed. However, it is intrinsic to Christianity to be present in the world with our principles and beliefs and to contribute thereby to the building up of the common good. Being forced to commit or participate in actions against one's conscience and religious beliefs and against the moral law, and the silencing of religious voices in the public sphere, those two things are violations of the nature and dignity of what it is to be a human person. Now, this situation, which I've begun to describe, it is something new. I would say very new. Like, I don't even think it was like this 4 years ago, let's say. What's the difference between what's new now? Talk quieter? Okay. She's telling me to talk quieter, the translator. What's new now and the situation 4 or 5 years ago. So, in the not so distant past, those, for example, in favor of abortion, they simply wanted, I'm taking abortion as my example now, they simply wanted tolerance, often legal tolerance, for their actions. We had a bumper sticker. I know you don't do that here in Europe, put little stickers on the back of our cars so everyone behind us knows what we think. But there was a bumper sticker that read, "Don't like abortion? Don't have one." This meant that those who do not want to participate in abortion didn't have to, but they should leave alone those who do want to. Okay? And things are different now. The difference now is that those who do not want to participate in immoral practices will be punished for not participating. Another way to put this is, in the past, people who argued for abortion or for redefining marriage, for example, were people who rejected moral absolutes. They were moral relativists. Now, however, those people have taken the template, if you will, of moral absoluteness and applied it to their positions. And this has happened rapidly, and it is something new. You could put it like this. They've taken the true content out of the moral law and put in the opposite, and then said, whoever doesn't obey and participate in that will be punished. A simple general example, take the 5th commandment, thou shalt not kill. Well, they have rewritten this to say, we as a society shall kill, in the form of euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, and abortion, and you shall contribute to the killing or suffer the consequences. And I have examples coming up to show that this is what they're doing. It's as if they're saying now, not to kill is the sin, and all those who choose not to contribute to the killing for reasons of conscience are the new immoral people. So everything is truly upside down. Upside down. Now, before I get to the specific examples, what I've said so far, I think, can help us grasp clearly this famous distinction of Pope Benedict between relativism and the tyranny of relativism. Relativism is just the idea that there is no moral law. It's just a live and let live approach. Whereas the tyranny of relativism is the use of power to coerce everyone to participate in actions contrary to the moral law. And this is what Pope Benedict was concerned about in his address to the bishops of the United States. It may not be obvious, but the tyranny of relativism logically and necessarily follows from relativism. You might ask yourself, how could live and let live lead to coerced participation in evil? They seem like opposites. But the answer is that once you remove objective moral truth from the equation, that's relativism, no objective truth, the only thing left is power. Whoever has the most power determines the law. Might makes right happens immediately after relativism becomes the norm of society, because there is precisely no moral law above us. And the only power left is to organize society. The only thing left to organize society is power. I like how St. Augustine, one of the greatest teachers in the history of the world, said that he was a student. All of us are students of the truth. That's our teacher. And if you take that out, the only thing left is power. That's why relativism leads to tyranny. Okay. And the Pope said that it is imperative that the entire Catholic community in the United States come to realize the grave threats to the Church's public moral witness presented by a radical secularism which finds increasing expression in the political and cultural spheres. And he said the seriousness of these threats needs to be clearly appreciated at every level of ecclesial life. He said that to our bishops. And then he, you could say, encouraged U.S. Catholics by saying, for her part, the Church in the United States is called in season and out of season to proclaim a gospel which not only proposes unchanging moral truths, but proposes them precisely as the key to human happiness and to social prospering. I will come back to this idea of proposing the unchanging moral truths later and connect it to the Symposium and Theology of the Body. But now I do want to just go through, I have many of them, I'm just going to select a few. And I'm only going to present them briefly. I have more details on these if you want to talk about them at lunch or something. Striking examples of this new phenomenon now in the United States, which wasn't the case even just a few years ago. So one example, there's an organization called Catholic Charities. And one of the things Catholic Charities does is provide adoption and foster care, so giving children to intact families. But the Catholic Charities type of adoption and foster care will not place children with same-sex couples or couples who are opposite sex but just cohabitating and not married. Well, so far in Boston and in San Francisco and in Washington, D.C., and in the whole state of Illinois, these Catholic charity adoption agencies have had their licenses revoked or their grants taken away because they won't give. So what's the difference? In the past, you would have some that would give children to same-sex couples and others that wouldn't, and people could choose. Now the ones that won't are being punished. In fact, forced to close. So that's one quick example. Second, you probably heard in the news this famous HHS mandate. That word HHS is the name for one of our federal departments called Health and Human Services. And we have this whole new healthcare law over there now. And one dimension of it is, to put it sort of in a sentence, every employer in the United States is going, that's how we do our health insurance over there. The employers pay for the health insurance, if you will, is going to have to pay for contraception for their employees if they want it, sterilization procedures, and the pills that cause abortion early on, okay? So this is, or they will be punished with massive fines if they don't do that, okay? So in the past, once again, freedom of religion would let people not have to participate in that. Okay, another example, I think I'm going to do maybe 4 of them, just quickly. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has a department called the Migration and Refugee Services. And one of the things they did, unfortunately, we have to use the past tense here, is they had a program which was a top-rated program to get women and children out of the human trafficking, sex trafficking, they're kidnapped in there. And the bishops had an excellent program that was saving many of them. And they were told by the federal government very recently that if they don't either provide or explicitly refer for contraception and abortion to the women they save, then their federal money for this program would be taken away from them. And the bishops didn't do that. So it's closed. It's closed now. This is very difficult to grasp why someone would do this. The court, this is rather surprising. I'm going to show you even maybe more deeply how insidious this is. There's a federal court in Massachusetts that this case came to, and they argued, you have to convolute your mind to understand this a little bit, they argued that the government, by providing funds to this Catholic agency, the bishop's top-rated program, was violating the First Amendment, was violating religious liberty, because they think that to not provide contraception and abortion to the women you save is coercing your religion onto them. Let me put it in one other way. Let me put it in this way. Here's the way to really grasp the sort of, I think, I don't want to be uncharitable, but it sort of seems like a sickness of mind when I say this next part, you'll see. Or maybe a better way to put it is, when you hear this, you can see this is a spiritual battle, not just arguments. I think a way to express it would be like this. The court had a choice between A, all the women and children that the bishops save will stay with their kidnappers in this horrible situation, or B, save all those women and children from their kidnappers, but the helpers who save them are pro-life. The court rejected A because of B. They would rather have all the women stay with the kidnappers than the helpers be pro-life. So, okay. So I have many more examples, but hopefully you can see that this is, that is really, what is that? That's you participate in killing, or else we're not helping you, okay? And by the way, I don't know if I agree with the people who think that agencies like that shouldn't take federal money. I think that the relationship between church and state is that the church and the state are supposed to know each other's role, which they each have a proper role, and they're supposed to be happy about each other's role, but never usurp each other's role. And there are times when they support each other. And perhaps this federal money saving all these women in a normal, healthy situation where the culture was aware of the natural law, they would be very happy that all these people were being helped. Now, there are very many good things happening, too, so we don't want to be too, like in France, we've been talking about at the meals, all these marches, 3 of them with 1 million people defending marriage. And in America, actually, in 2010, the midterm elections there, you didn't hear about it in the news, but on the local and state levels, many pro-life people got elected. And in many states in the country now, there are all these, what they call in the news, restrictions on abortion, like ultrasounds are required, or abortion places where they do abortion are required to get hospital admitting privileges. And I think in North Dakota, we're going to have, it's going to be illegal after 6 weeks to have an abortion. So these are being challenged by the pro-abortion people. And from what I understand, I think June 20th, the U.S. Supreme Court is going to decide whether they're going to hear some of these cases. And the New York Times reporter said that they're probably going to hear them. So we're going to have actual abortion cases in the fall before the court. So that's the cultural situation, tyranny of relativism. Now, how does that relate to the new evangelization? How does that relate to theology of the body? How does that relate to what we're doing here at this symposium? Well, what is the text of theology of the body? One way to put it in a sentence would be to say that theology of the body is a rich commentary on Humanae Vitae, meant to bring to light the goodness of its teaching by explaining the underlying reasons in a way that inspires the faithful to live it because they themselves understand those reasons. I like at the end of the piazza here, you have in front of the new church a big statue of Paul VI and a big statue of John Paul II there. And I think of it as Humanae Vitae and theology of the body. And one of the ways to express this, the church has what she calls in her moral documents precise moral indications. Those are sort of the one-word prohibit, like IVF. We need an answer from the magisterium. No. Contraception. We need an answer from the magisterium. No. And it's a gift, by the way, to us from the church that we have the magisterium to get these quick answers. But we also have to understand the deeper reasons for them. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but that's the relationship. I think theology of the body is a scriptural, philosophical, theological, in-depth expression of all the reasons of being a human person and so forth, which people can use to understand. And maybe we'll hear about some of those reasons in some of the other talks today. The goodness of the church's precise moral indications. As we heard at the beginning, they're the source of true happiness and the prospering of society. Now, related to that, we have the 7 deadly sins in Christian teaching, and one of those is sloth, one that we don't really think about too much, the sin of sloth. And this sin of sloth, it is not laziness. Sometimes we think it causes laziness, but it wouldn't be good to. And I found a little definition of it in Love and Responsibility, the other book by John Paul II. I've slightly tweaked the definition, but this is the definition of sloth from how I understand Wojtyła to be defining it. Sloth is the feeling of sadness that overcomes you when you realize that being good is difficult. Some of you have experienced that. All right. So anyway, so the precise moral indications then, that sloth happens to us when we hear these precise moral indications, these prohibitions. They can seem difficult. And in Theology of the Body, I think John Paul gives us two, possibly more than just two, but he gives us two solutions, if you will, to this sloth, to this sadness. One is self-mastery. So we will always have to do acts of the will to overcome temptation. We can grow, and we do grow in virtue. It's something we experience, and it's a joy. But we also will always have to do acts of self-mastery to obey the moral law. And the other solution that he gives in there is really the understanding, as I said before, this deep understanding of the reasons for the goodness of the church's teaching, and then interiorizing it and sort of experiencing the happiness of living according to it. In those Q&As that Pope Francis did recently, one young man asked him about this, and he said, "Don't be afraid of failure. The problem with the journey of life and faith isn't falling. It's not getting back up, right back up immediately, and keep going." That's what he said to do. Okay. So now, as I said, I'm just giving an overview. We're going to hear the content of the text as we just did from our other speakers. So the year of faith. We're in this year of faith right now, and we're grateful that the year of faith at the Vatican put our symposium up there as one of the official events. And as I understand it from the beginning, Pope Benedict wants us during this year of faith to read the Catechism and the documents of Vatican II. He wants us to read them, to interiorize their true content. And I think we can add to that Theology of the Body. And I think he's also making a distinction between missionary work and the new evangelization. So the distinction is that missionary work is Christian outreach to areas of the world where the faith has not yet been introduced, while the new evangelization is the attempt to explain to people who are baptized what the faith really is. And I don't know, someone has to correct me in lunch. I was trying to Google this. I think C.S. Lewis said this. But it's a very poignant way to get this point across, and maybe it fits to our symposium here. I think Lewis said, to bring the gospel to a place where it has never been heard is like trying to win the heart of a woman you have just met for the first time. But to try to introduce the faith into a place that was once thriving in the faith but has since dropped it is like trying to win back a jaded divorcee. So there we have a higher challenge here. And so now with respect to this question, there's two things, okay? One is what I've been saying so far. Are we able, we can all ask ourselves this question, if somebody comes back to us and comes to us who's got an open mind, I think these postmodern, as they call it, people, I think they will give you a listen. If they say, well, why is the church against same-sex marriage, or why is so-called same-sex marriage, or why is the church against contraception for married couples? Are we prepared to give a reason that can be understood by someone else, just to the point where they say, oh, that's sensible, I guess I never thought of it that way? Or can you just do a platitude and say, because the church said so? So if you don't interiorize it, you won't be able to, as St. Peter says, give a reason for the hope that is within us. Now, though, and that's very important, but our participation has to be actually more than being able to explain the reasons to people in an intellectual argument. I'm going to put this next point, and this point is what relates to my quote at the beginning from Cardinal Ratzinger. I'm going to put my point I want to make right now in the form of a question. Is there a sense in which knowledge of Christian morality or just knowledge of the natural law can only be known by the wider public if a critical mass of people actually live a fulfilled life according to it, precisely out of their own interiorization of the truth, goodness, and beauty of it. So it's a challenge, as I said before, for us to live according to traditional morality, but we really try. We have grace of God, and we grow. And so the question is, when a non-believer meets a person who's living that way, that can have an effect on them. Two effects, actually. It could open them up to receiving the gift of faith themselves, but it also could encourage them to consider living life in a different way. Something interesting is that, to deepen this point now about the importance of Christian witness as opposed to just explaining, is that Cardinal Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, wrote some books with Jürgen Habermas, who is a German world-class philosopher, sociologist, atheist, and Marcello Pera, who is a philosopher of science and also was the president of the Italian Senate for a long time. And Habermas and Pera are interesting, and this is a change in Habermas's views. They're interesting because both of them are very concerned about Europe losing itself. And so they're openly calling for religious voices, and in particular the Christian roots of Europe, to be back into the public sphere. So like Habermas has become the opposite of John Rawls now in a way. And Cardinal Ratzinger noticed this, and he had dialogues with them and wrote books with them because he found a point of agreement with them. But the point of disagreement, so he's very happy that they want to have the Christian wisdom back into the public sphere, but Ratzinger rejects the notion, which I think I'm accurately representing of Marcello Pera, that you could build a healthy society on the scaffolding of Christian social and moral teaching without anyone in that society actually believing in God. I think that's what Pera is saying. But what's good about it is he understands that the reason Europe is losing itself is because it is erasing its roots. That's the name of the book, Senza Radici, that Pera wrote. And so he wants the roots back, but he's an agnostic. And Ratzinger thinks that the teachings, the social and moral teachings of the Catholic Church, are accessible to reason, and therefore he agrees, and I like how Cardinal Ratzinger puts it, he's sort of saying, people of today, before it is too late, please just try living according to Catholic social and moral teaching, because it really is good for you, and society will flourish if you do. Ratzinger is agreeing with that. He's asking people of today. But Ratzinger does not think that a society in which no one had a living faith could sustain a structure built on those principles of the faith which is now dead. But here's the interesting thing. He doesn't think that it has to be everybody converted or even a majority of people for the teachings of the faith to have an impact on society. But he does think that there has to be a critical mass. I don't know how many people that is, but who live the faith deeply for it to be a leaven in the society. And so Ratzinger is calling on Christians, which can recollect the quote at the beginning about the only real effective witness is the saints and art, beauty, to realize that if they want to even reach the level of convincing open-minded non-believers of basic social and moral principles in the Christian tradition, that we have to be witnesses or it won't work. There's a quote of Pope Paul VI. This is a quite striking one of Paul VI. He said, "Modern man listens more willingly to witnesses than to teachers. And if he does listen to teachers, it is because they are witnesses." So in order for a specific set of truths to really have a positive impact on the culture, there has to be a critical mass of people who grasp the truth deeply and live it because of that grasping. So that's basically my talk. In conclusion, I'd just like to maybe say one thing more and then repeat one point. The symposium here, I forgot to mention yesterday at the beginning, is meant to explore the text, which is what all the speakers are doing. I told them to incorporate the text into their talks. So I broke my own rule, but I'm giving them the job to do that. But one of the things we're trying to do here is the thing we all have in common is this faithfulness to the magisterium and love of the church. But we have a great wide variety of some psychologists, some medical doctors, some philosophers, some theologians, some coming from a more Thomistic position, some coming from what they call a personalist position, uniting them. We have Europeans, Americans. This time we even have one or possibly two African presenters. So the idea, the text is rich with these meaning content, I would say. And we want to just bring it out in all these different directions with this eye on trying our best to become a little more holy witnesses if we can, and really explore the text. So I'm getting my little minutes up there, so I'll just stop. I'll be done now. I've saved 2 minutes, so thank you very much.